IBS Messenger. Mr. Pranav has curated the Space Museum at BM Birla Science Center, Hyderabad. He is also the co-author of an astronomy graduate textbook to be published by Institute of Physics, London. He is majorly consulted by government departments and private ventures in science and communication and outreach. He is awarded Karmaveer Fellowship thrice in recognition of his work in science communication, which is given by United Nations and ICONGO. He is also a fellow of Royal Astronomical Society and the Royal Society of Arts, UK. He is also the co-founder of Agra Book Club and has a keen interest in poetry and literature. He is widely regarded for his interdisciplinary work on astronomy and poetry. He was recently featured on Vice World News as the young bipolar scientist who designs India's top space museums. His work has received international acclaim, and today we look to find out his views on India's standing for global perspective. Now, it is the time to call upon our esteemed guest for today, Mr. Pranav Sharma, and I would like to invite him to take over. Please, sir.
Wonderful. Thank you. I think let's see if I can do some justice to the talk today. Just give me a second. Huh? Yeah, sorry. The downside of doing talks when you're home is that every now and then you can get a delivery guy getting you something. Never mind. So I'll be talking about how the worldview has changed uh, in context of India and how India looks at the world. So let's start in talking about how independence shaped India. India was born out of war, so to speak. It was born out of bloodshed, and we've seen India growing into in the memory of partition, in the memory and remembrance of the Second World War. And in that, the leadership, the Indian leadership, has a wonderful worldview, so to speak. People like Nehru, Bhabha, Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar, C.V. Raman, Meghnad Saha, Vikram Sarabhai has brilliant worldview for India. They wanted to make India a scientific nation. Now, let's just talk about this worldview a little. So, what gives anybody a perspective in society, or perspective for a nation, or for oneself? It primarily is the kind of education one had. Nehru was educated at Cambridge, so was Bhabha and Sarabhai and other places. So these people were products of Western education, and they took elements of Western education and they wanted to modernize India with those Western concepts. So now there's a little criticism about it. And when I say a little criticism, we are just looking at it in a perspective. So when English Enlightenment era started, they used science as a method for enlightenment and reformation. All the colonizing powers, primarily the Western Europeans, they used science as a tool for modernizing and quote unquote civilizing the colonial world. When Indian Science Congress was established in India, it was lauded primarily because it was a civilizational mission. And when you look at Nehru's views in his book, The Discovery of India, which is with me here, and I strongly suggest that everybody read his book. It's brilliantly written. It's a wonderful text to engage with. I'll talk about the book in a little detail just later on. So when you look at Nehru's worldview, you see that he's engaging in the Indian discourse with all those Western scientific concepts, in a sense that he would want to modernize this country with rationale, with scientific so-called temper. He would like to modernize and talk about reformation using science. This practically, this started in 1946 when the Discovery of India was written. He was in jail, of course. And that was the first time when he talks about something called a scientific temper. That was the same time when Bertrand Russell was talking about the scientific outlook. And that was a time when logic was thriving in the enlightened world. Um, uh, it's just a word when I'm saying enlightened world. I'm talking about Western Europe in that particular era. In Western Europe, we had some Reformation talks happening on logic. That was the time when modern physics was thriving. That was primarily the time when everything was changing. The entire construct of our worldview, so to speak, was changing. So this led to a long discussions in the Constituent Assembly. And when you look at Constitution of India, what you primarily see is in the mandate where it talks about citizens' fundamental duties, in Article 51A, subsection H, it says that the fundamental duty of an Indian citizen is to develop the scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform. And now we have to look at a couple of things here. One is scientific temper, the other one is inquiry, and the third one is reform. Scientific temper, I have already mentioned, roots from the notion of enlightenment, the notion of civilization mission, so to speak. But this time, as Nehru candidly once said, that he was the last Englishman to rule India. Unfortunately, it was held against him, but I don't think it should be held against him. It's just a joke to be cracked, but not in a good sense. But when you look at, he was a product of Western education. And being the product of Western education, he wanted to reform this country. And look at this. I mean, we had a large population which was primarily illiterate at that time. We did not have any strong or well organized education systems which were accessible to public, so to speak. We were not organized and we were not efficient in documenting anything. We did not have any modern or strong scientific infrastructure. The knowledge of elements that were needed for national planning were absent. Now, what do you do when you are a very young nation who want to work on development of this country, but you don't have means? So here's something which Sarabhai used to use, the term he used to call leapfrogging. So leapfrogging is something that you develop modern scientific technology and use that as a developmental tool. So that leapfrogging was primarily done, and there were scientific institutions were being built at the time. Primarily, Meghnad Saha and C.V. Raman were involved firsthand. There were people like Homi Bhabha, who had prime ministers here. And at that time, Nehru had that kind of international worldview, and there's no doubt in saying that Nehru was an internationalist. He was an internationalist, and if you look at the conversations between Albert Einstein and Jawaharlal Nehru, you understand the kind of discourses these two great gentlemen shared. Now you would wonder why I'm talking about Nehru. The reason why I'm talking about Nehru, that in order to look at the global perspective of this country, we need to understand what kind of leadership we had, and if the leadership had a worldview. See, uh, when you have a political hegemony, when you have a political hierarchy, when you are running a country where the citizen and the government are two different spheres, the political will to do something is extremely important when it comes to engaging with the international audience. So Nehru was convinced that we needed science. Nehru was convinced that we needed international platforms to talk about. He had people like Bhabha go to United Nations. He was personally engaging with United Nations. There were people like Sarabhai was sent, Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar was engaging, Praful Bhavsar was engaged, E.V. Chitnis was there, T.N. Seshan, so to speak, T.N. Seshan, who was very famous Chief Election Commissioner of India, to whom we can certainly, give him the credit of modern electoral system of this country. Seshan was the first person to sign international scientific trade agreements at that time. People like Manmohan Singh, who were credited the nationalization of bank reform or the liberalization of policies, they were the people who actually engaged in internationalization of science. Now, you might be wondering why this man is talking about science in detail. The reason why I'm doing this is that the era of traditional diplomacy has ended. In the aftermath of the Cold War, since the early 2000s, what we are seeing, there's something called a para-diplomacy which started. There's something called a soft diplomacy which started. You started engaging in the public sphere, right? So when you look at something like scientific institutions joining in, there are a lot of collaborations which are going on. That is exactly where two nations are engaging in wonderful diplomatic discourse. So that particular landscape, which was in the era of people like Henry Kissinger, of people like in the 90s, so to speak, and of course during the Cold War, that era slowly faded out because we realized that the robust diplomacy has practically nothing to do with modern landscape. And it has become an era of information technology. It has become an era of science, and it's imperative to say that the 21st century is the century of science, and it is. I think it won't be an exaggeration to say that in 10 years down the line, all world governments are going to invest a lot of time, effort, and money in their diplomatic, in strengthening their diplomatic landscape and their diplomatic ties, because the world economics, so to speak, does not allow conflict. The universe abhors a vacuum, right? So now let's just go back to our citizenry duty of scientific temper. This was engaged. This was incorporated, in the Constitution of India, all thanks to Jawaharlal Nehru. Now, what happens when people like Jawaharlal Nehru, who have a wonderful worldview, engage with people who share the worldview or who are the people who can actually add on to that? So he was the person who was engaging with people like J.R.D. Tata. People such as C.V. Raman were consulted. People such as Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar and Homi Bhabha consulted. Imagine giving Atomic Energy Commission a beautiful space in South Block, where top ministries don't even have space in South Block, because Nehru wanted unrestricted access to these wonderful scientists. He used to call them scientific bureaucrats. The first generation of scientific bureaucrats was Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar and Homi Bhabha. The entire concept of having a principal scientific advisor to the government of India or having a science secretary, it was to engage in the developmental practice of the country utilizing science. So now what India does as an independent nation, one of those very few things, one of those very first things that India did, India incorporated in the scientific discourse the importance of atomic and nuclear energy and the atomic and nuclear technology. Now, why was that important? Because we just saw horrors of nuclear energy. Hiroshima and Nagasaki was devastated. We saw horrors of war, and we were born out of conflict. No nation is born at peace. We just born out of conflict. And Bhabha was convinced that we need science. And Nehru said, okay, perfect, let's do it. So Atomic Energy Act of 1948 was incorporated. It was enacted on 4th of March 1949. And then, of course, amendments were done. It gave central government all the powers to engage in modern nuclear energy research, atomic technology, nuclear reactors, so on and so forth. So that is something which was very interestingly done. Now, when you're engaging in something like this, can you do it alone? The answer to that is you need technology. You need technology transfer. And why would any nation support you? There has to be a bilateral exchange, right? So what was India providing? India was providing manpower because that was the only thing that we had at that time. And why would any nation invest in India? Because India sits on a very important geostrategic position in Asia. When USSR started engaging with India immediately after independence, you would see that there were a lot of bilateral exchanges between United States and Pakistan. There were very unique bilateral exchanges between China and Pakistan, and then we had a lot of people coming in and going. The moment we announced our that India is open to an international engagement, so to speak, where we are open to involve international partners, there were so many people who put a lot of effort. The primary countries were the United States, Russia, France. Uh, we had some engagement with Southeastern Asian nations. We had Germany joining in. We had the United Kingdom joining in that time. And imagine when Atomic Energy Act was made, we the first Governor General of India was Lord Mountbatten, and he was involved in every stage of decision making in independent India. We usually don't talk about all of this. I don't know why, but I think there's some merit which should be given to people like Mountbatten who actually wanted to help India develop. And he was the people who convinced a couple of senior bureaucrats in the United Kingdom to engage with India. And in that, there were this Professor Messi, who was the father of the United Kingdom's space program, who visited India and also helped engage with Sarabhai. And Messi and Sarabhai were colleagues at Cambridge so many years ago. Now, when something like this happens, we started engaging with modern scientists and modern scientific technologies. We started engaging with brilliant nations. We started engaging with United Nations. And this took time. And by that time, United Nations realized that we need an international dialogue. So a United Nations Committee for Peaceful Use for Atomic Energy was made. And the first chairman, to your surprise, was Homi Bhabha. Homi Bhabha led the world to engage in discussion on the peaceful use of atomic energy. And we had lots of representation. And we came back home with wonderful ties. And in his opening address, he mentioned why India needs atomic energy and why everybody should engage with India. You would remember, if you would, that there was this American president, Herbert Hoover. If I'm not wrong, he was involved in engaging discussions on the League of Nations before United Nations, and he came back. He went back home in the United States, and he was stonewalled by Congress. He was stonewalled by his Senate. But when Bhabha came back to India, he was applauded by Nehru, and he was. And there were I read some letters that Bhabha asking for his consent and Bhabha seeking his advice, and Nehru explicitly saying that it's your domain and it's your expertise, and I'm nobody to tell you what to do. But do remember, do keep India's interests in mind, and I know you would. So there was a very strong trust between the political leadership and the scientific community. Now I would like to talk about something called a Science Policy Resolution number 1958. The Science Policy Resolution primarily strengthened uh, the subsection H of Article 51A of the Constitution of India, which primarily talks about the scientific timber. Now, why was this introduced? Because we wanted to establish very strong scientific institutions. And in 1957, we just saw a USSR put first satellite in space. And that was the time when we wanted to have our own space program. So we had our own space program on 21st November, which is tomorrow. We launched our space program, 21st November 1963. And then the site was dedicated to United Nations. That was a great international victory or diplomatic victory because it involved people from various countries to come to India, do their experiments. And in that process, we were putting our scientists there as their assistants, and they were learning by conducting experiments with them. Now, this was not very new to India. R.A. Millikan visited India in 1930s, and we did cosmic ray experiments. And we're going back to Raman's era when Raman was the director of Indian Institute of Sciences, and all that was happening. There was a physical research laboratory in several places, including Chandigarh and Agra, and Hyderabad. We did some wonderful experiments, and and we also got an edge because of our strong narrative of the non-alignment movement of 1961. We did not engage in any bloc politics, and which had put us in a very unique position, primarily because Nehru had wonderful ties with so many different nations, and our scientific community involved wonderful people, and these were the people who were involved in wonderful in several brilliant science experiments, and there was no conflict, so to speak. We and when this block conflict was going on, when this block US versus USSR, that entire enmity was going on, we were having best of both worlds. In 1961, we signed the Non-Alignment Movement Pact, and in 1963, we launched our space program, and that was also the time when we were making our own reactors. And I would want to let you know that when the first rocket was launched, the experiment which was conducted was French. The rocket was American, and there were USSR scientists engaged in training and everything. So even when US and USSR were fighting, we had a peaceful dialogue here in Tumba in India. So India was also kind of extending an olive branch here and there on the international platform. Now let us also talk about why India has a geostrategic position uh, here in Asia. Uh, we are we are part of this very volatile peninsula, so to speak. We have young nations around us. We have two of particularly volatile nations, which are Bangladesh and Pakistan. We have a very peaceful nation like Bhutan just around the corner. We have very aggressive nation like China just next to us, and Afghanistan. So India's neighbors are it's a very volatile landscape, and India has democracy, and India has a lot of population. Now we say that our problem is population, but we also have a lot of human resource. We have a lot of human potential, and we elect our leaders by democratic uh, electorate. that actually gives us an edge because we never had a coup. We have never had internal, we may have had internal political conflicts, but we've never had military versus politics kind of, you know, polite rendezvous, so to speak. But Pakistan had. We've seen dictators like General Zia uh, just next door, right? And that is something which and that nation has been very volatile, and we've been very stable at that time. We've been primarily stable because I think we should give some credit to our democracy for that. And you would wonder that this entire engagement of ours with free market economy, with letting people invest in our country, with I mean, brain drain is a bad word to use now, but that is also our soft power. We have people of Indian origin sitting at very important places. The director of National Science Foundation of US is an Indian. The upcoming vice president of the United States of America is a woman of Indian origin. So this is a very soft diplomatic politics that India has done because we have human potential, we have lots of human resource, and people have gone and put in their effort and work. People have given their time and effort to building other nations as well. So that is our soft diplomatic power. Now, now you all of you who've been following me for past, I don't know, 30 minutes or so, and you would wonder that he's been talking about a lot of things. What is the worldview that he's talking about? This is the worldview that I'm talking about. India has penetrated in cities. India has penetrated in all major scientific, non-scientific, cultural, political discourses of almost every country in this world. We have the best example as the Vice President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris, the chairperson of National Science Foundation. We have brilliant scientists leading experiments at CERN, in NASA, in other places as well. That is something which is our soft power. And I'm sorry to admit the fact that we are not utilizing it. It's sad, but it's true. And but we've done something of that sort in the past. I will come to talk about this kind of scientific diplomacy in some time, but let me just take you a while back. And I would like to give you a couple of case studies to look at. One is something called the satellite instructional television experiment. We wanted to educate people using television. And this was 1960s. And you would wonder, a nation who just got independence, we don't even have food to provide to people. We just suffered the sorrows of partition. We are almost in conflict with all of our neighboring countries. And now we want to teach our people using television. Sarabhai told this to Yashpal, and Yashpal was a professor of high energy physics at TIFR at that time. And Sarabhai was also at TIFR because Bhabha was at TIFR, and Sarabhai had just established something called an INCOSPA, which was Indian National Committee for Science, Outer Space Research. It was based out of TIFR, Tars and Experimental Research in Bombay. And Yashpal told Sarabhai, see, I think you've gone bonkers, Vikram. And there's no point in talking to me. Let's go and talk to the Prime Minister. And the Prime Minister said, yeah, well, let's just do it. Fine. Mrs. Gandhi was the Prime Minister at that time. And he asked, and then she asked Sarabhai that why would you do it? You don't even have rockets. You don't have satellites, and how are you going to do it? He said, see, US is doing it. There's something called a satellite instructional television experiment which is going on. There was also a radio mathematics project in the US which is going on. We don't have time for that. But a side program is something which is very interesting. So Sarabhai, in his autonomous power within COSPA, was able to mobilize the entire diplomatic discourse in from the United Nations to the United States, and they were able to convince the United States government that India would use the satellite called the ATS-6 satellite if it was moved a little closer towards the Indian subcontinent, and they will shoot programs in Ahmedabad, a place called the Space Application Center, which was established then, and Yashpal was the founding director, that they would shoot television programs here. They'll broadcast it using the ATS-6 satellite. The televisions were made in Ahmedabad. They were taken to villages, and do you know what were they teaching? They were teaching how to do farming. They were teaching how to utilize agriculture to support their economy. And these were the people who were brilliant scientists, and these are the people who were able to mobilize diplomats internationally. And mind you, people from all over the world engaged with India, and lots of MOUs were signed. I might have copies somewhere here. Oh, they're not here. Otherwise, I would have shown you. It's European Space Agency's MOUs. All of that was done. And I think if you were born in the 90s or early 2000s, you would know there's something called Krishi Darshan, which was telecasted on Doordarshan, usually, how to, and genetically modified seeds were, being talked about and all of that. That was ATS-6. That green revolution was all that the Krishi Darshan actually supported green revolution. And genetically modified seeds, which we credit MS Swaminathan for, they engaged with the international community to work here in India. Then the other one was Apple satellite. That was France. And you would wonder, 1981's Independence Day speech was broadcasted by Apple satellite. Then there was an INSAT program, which was the Indian Communication Satellite Program. And they were able to convince United Nations that we are going to have our own communication satellite program, our own communication satellite constellation, our own nomenclature system. That's how INSAT was made, Indian National Satellite Systems, Communication Satellite Systems. That was designed. That was a great diplomatic victory. And then, if you remember, there was this, the first Indian cosmonaut to go to space was Rakesh Sharma. And that was an India and USSR project. And you would wonder if you've seen that video, which I think you should have seen. If you've not seen, then you should go and see, when Mrs. Gandhi asks Rakesh Sharma, Hindustan ऊपर से कैसा लगता है, and to which Rakesh Sharma replies, सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा, which is very famous, very famous. That was watched by everybody who had television in the USSR, because there was no way they could relay that conversation between Mrs. Gandhi and Rakesh Sharma. The entire Soviet Union watched Mrs. Gandhi talk to Rakesh Sharma. And then towards the end of that interview, Mrs. Gandhi says, let me translate it to the people who understand English and not Hindi. And she does all of that. That was Indian worldview, so to speak. Now, giving you a little background on how India has engaged with the world, now let's come back to the 21st century. Now we have something called a modern scientific diplomacy. We are engaged in mega science projects. Now, when you look at all those trade agreements, they have a corollary which involves academia, right? It involves academic collaborations. You will see that there are international centers being established, which engages academic communities of these trade agreement countries. If we are having something called an Indo-French agreement, there's an institute in Delhi called Indo-French Center for Advancement of Scientific Research. Then there are Indo-US advanced hospitals you've seen. Then there are Russian collaborations which we've seen. Now we with mega science projects like LIGO India, which is being made in Hingoli in Maharashtra. There's a 30-meter telescope where we are partners with CERN, the European Particle Physics Laboratory. Now, when I'm talking about this, I should also let you know that why these are and as I mentioned that the era of traditional diplomacy has ended. The entire economics of diplomacy is based on this one-on-one, institution-to-institution engagement, international engagement. That is the new form of diplomacy. That is the new way of getting into the international market. For example, if you now that we are working on the coronavirus vaccine, and of course we will have the vaccine at some point of time. Pfizer made it. Pfizer has done so many brilliant things in past. I think all of us know. There's no need to crack jokes here. So that vaccine is made. So there's a lot of international effort which has gone in, and all of us were working together on it. If you look at the kind of teams that they've had, you would see that there are a lot of people from various different countries joining in and working together. That is a scientific diplomacy. And that also gives share of responsibility to various nations. That also gives a share of belongingness to this one world culture that we are working towards. Now, you I think I should also talk about little about the post-colonial world, because when we are talking about post-colonial India, we should also talk about a little on the post-colonial discourse, and then I would end. We have seen that there's a little hangover from our colonial masters in this country. It's very interesting that all of us do understand at least one or two languages which are of Indian origin, and yet we are speaking in English and learning in English, and I'm delivering this talk in English. And if I were to speak in English, but if it is incorrect or I do wrong pronunciations, you will have an impression that this guy is whatever I talk about, that I'm moron and I don't know him. That is something which is part of the hangover, and that is something which needs to be addressed. Of course, English is on the top of the hierarchy of languages. It is the language of the trade, yes, but there is a need for an Indian rootedness to it. There's an importance to the languages that we all speak, and when we do that, we should also engage in our language in an international discourse, which would also mean that we are strengthening and broadening an international perspective on India by contributing to the cultural discourse of the world. Thank you so much. I have finished, just so you know.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. This has been an amazing session. Now, I open the floor for the questions for the audience.
Oh my God. Please, go on.
Participants are requested to keep their queries in the chat box so that our guests can answer your questions.
I think, Aman, you would have to take the initiative to give me some questions here, because I can't see anything on my screen.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
Yeah, just choose some questions and just do.
So Indian space research is taking a turn, like the way the transformation is today in like the Indian satellites. We have seen there are many missions coming up. Where you see India in next 10 years as the transformation has come from 90s to 20s?
Oh, it's wonderful actually, because space research in India is on a thrive, and to launch a satellite from India is particularly cheap. It all narrows down to economics. And as I said, scientific diplomacy is the new form of diplomacy. It is very interesting, and it's soft diplomacy, you're engaging with people to people, institution to institution, and all that. And these are something that these strengthen ties between countries. For example, India and France sign an MOU that we are going to say launch 100 satellites in next 10 years. Now, these both countries are bound not only by the contract, but by the people who are building those satellites, by the team. There are thousands of scientists working together. So now, even when a little conflict arises, they would like to mellow it down, work out a little here and there. So that is why it becomes important to engage in a scientific discourse. In whenever you're looking at a trade discourse, you should see that when the agreements are signed, when the agreements are designed, how many industries, how many people, and how many disciplines it involves. For example, if I were to sign a trade agreement between India and say Germany, what if I say I'm signing a trade agreement between India and Germany on some technology transfers here and there, then I would develop some technology, it will be sent commercially to Germany and all. It does two things. It involves my manufacturer to talk to the buyer in Germany. So there's a one-on-one interaction. And look at the layer of it. To communicate properly, the other person either needs to learn English or Hindi, right? And we do need to have some working understanding of German, right? And that is where the language schools come. It's just very refined form of diplomacy, very, very refined form. Now coming to the space program, see, because it's economic, it is going to thrive. But the danger is that just because it's economic, we should not oversell. That is something that India needs to keep in check. Right? Under commit, over deliver. Right? If you promise to do 30 things, deliver 31. Don't promise 30 things and deliver 5. When you have capacity of doing 2 things, only commit for 1. So this overcommitment might be a problem, because I see people getting very ambitious. But India being India, we see a lot of delay in things, especially when it comes to political activism.
So we have another question in the chat box.
Okay.
Harshit sir has a question. Harshit sir, you can please unmute yourself and ask the question to our guest.
Yeah.
So first of all, thank you for this informative session. I really loved it. And so since that in early, I think in August, so we saw that
Harshit sir.
Yes,
Please wait. I guess we're
I
saying something.
ask your face, so and then ask you the question. Arshid, you need to switch on your camera, I think. Yeah, now.
Sure, sir.
Tell me.
So I would like to ask that now we see the presence of private players in space, like NASA's collaboration with SpaceX. So can we see some Indian players actually basically achieving this fate that we see some Indian private players to be specific in space?
See,
And if there is, so how?
There's something called a New Space India Consortium, and there's somebody in Hyderabad. His name is Farhan. So Farhan runs a company which collaborates with SpaceX. They've already launched a couple of qubit satellites from SpaceX technology, and there are people who are involved as private partners with ISRO. And there are international players as well. I sit on an Indo-Japanese venture capital firm, and we see these brilliant engagements between Government of India and different private partners funded by foreign investors. So it's very layered, and it is beautiful to look at. And yes, Indian landscape is changing. There are a lot of investments coming in. We have seen private partners working with public enterprise in past, and I think this engagement is going on. This engagement is going to go on for a long time.
Thank you, sir.
So, Rita Sharma ma'am has one question. Ma'am, please, you can unmute yourself and ask your question to our guest.
Hi, Pranav.
Hello, ma'am.
The, the session was very engaging,
Thank
and especially for a person like me, a non-science person who has not studied science maybe beyond 8th class. It was just like listening to a story. So it was very interesting for me. It was very interesting, take my word.
you.
But my question is, how can we create interest in our children from the very beginning in the schools? Like, I was never interested in science. I don't know why, because maybe the teachers were not good or whatever. Like, but I think I really feel that somebody should have helped me develop that curiosity or the questioning. I have the questioning attitude, but I don't know much about science because maybe I was not mentored or whatever. So I do not want people or my younger students like to be later on they say that we didn't have the exposure or maybe we didn't have the right kind of mentoring. What is it that we can do to bring science to every doorstep, every classroom, everywhere without the books?
That's a brilliant question, ma'am. And for those people, Rita ma'am has been a college teacher, and she never misses any event. Yeah. So I think that's really good. And to answer, just say one thing that no, hello. If you remember what citizen duty to engage in inquiry, and so the only thing we can do is to allow students to ask questions, understand.
Sorry, sir. The voice is getting echo. Uh, Rita ma'am, you can please unmute, mute so
Okay.
like
Okay,
the
okay.
voice won't echo.
Okay.
So what I was saying was that, that sense of inquiry is important. Letting people ask questions, letting people wonder, letting kids wonder. We should not give them ready-made answers. And of course, there are things which are institutionalized in this country, which include quotes and quotes traditions and quotes and quotes religion. But there should be room to have perspective, and there should be a room for inquiry and questioning in that. If you want to do something, do it, but also ask questions. And I'm not saying that when you're asking questions, you bash them. No, asking question is just a very fundamental way of life. If, for example, if you have, say, a festival going on, you have a 2-year-old kid, yeah, you just have to let the kid wonder, and you just start asking questions. All right, what do you see today? How the light works? Why are we celebrating this festival? Or whatever we are doing, why are we doing it? So the West has been very effective in inculcating this scientific inquiry. And every generation has seen brilliant layers of science communication. It started with people like Bertrand Russell, and with every generation, we've seen that the West has produced brilliant science communicators, primarily because they have engaged themselves, their education system, with the notion of inquiry. They've asked questions. And that is something which we have not done in India. How we are going to do it is that we start small, we start with families, we start with classrooms. Even if we have a policy mandate to it, unless the executor doesn't execute the policy, it is not going to work. I think there's some merit in starting small. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Pranav. Thank you.
Participants will be taking one more last question, then we will be closing. Uh, Bhavesh sir, you can ask your question. Please unmute and ask our guest. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. So first of all, thank you for this amazing session. So in between you mentioned that India has a lot of successful people, like the vice president is Indian origin, of America's Indian origin. But still, sir, India lags in everything basically. That is the GDP, logistics, agriculture, even the cost of labors, the cost of logistics, innovation, digital. When we have such successful people, when we have so much innovative people, why is India still lagging in each and everything?
That is a very interesting question to ask, and a very difficult question to answer. Um One, we need also one there's a need to look at our figures with in correlation with demographic dividend. That is one thing that we need to look at when we're looking at GDP in comparison. When we're looking, we are also looking at the population density. Because it's per capita and we have lots of population, then of course it goes for a toss. Now, talking about technology, sir, in the developing world, I think India has done a great work, right? Uh, I travel, whenever I travel internationally, my primary headache is telephone and internet, and which in India we take for granted. Okay, phone or internet to mil hi jayega. But if you travel internationally, specifically when you go to the West, it's a nightmare. And it is unbelievably expensive. Unbelievably expensive. I remember paying about 80 to $100 a month just to have a SIM in Canada. Without the internet, mind you. We used to use Wi-Fi, which is not as good as ours. So we've done good work. But yes, there's a lot of mediocrity, primarily because we don't allow ourselves to dream. I think we've learned how to settle. And I think we've learned how to settle for less. You settle for what you think you deserve. But, and I'm saying it to everybody who's listening to my talk here. You don't deserve to settle, Baba. You deserve to dream. You are entitled to dream. Luxury to dream. It's a developing country. You have potential. And that dream is going to make this country a great country. And the reason why we are lagging, yes, is because we've stopped dreaming. We were dreaming in the 60s. We were looking at space and wondering what we can do with it. We were looking at our fields and wondering what we can do with these. We had green revolution, we had our communication satellite systems, we nationalized the banks, we opened the economy, we did this, we did that, because we were dreaming. And I think life has hit us hard, very hard. And I think it is important to dream again. You dream, you achieve. And I think we as a country should develop a national character for not settling at all. Yeah, that
So
was part of motivation.
on that note, again a question, sir.
Yeah, go on, please.
So then according to that, we see we have so many engineers, so many graduates from commerce, arts, everywhere who have so many big dreams and lakhs students pass out. And they do have skills. Then where are these skills put, sir? Even in space, we see school students doing so amazing projects. They bring innovative ideas. I don't remember the exact timing, but there was a guy in 10th or 12th standard who just innovated the smallest satellite from India. Then what about that, sir? What about their dreams?
That's what I'm saying. We are doing good work, you know. But we do need to do it on a large scale. That is something which is required. And talking about engineers and everything, यार देखो ऐसा है कि मैंने बैचलर्स करी थी इंजीनियरिंग में, एंड I'm not going to disrespect anybody's engineering degree, but मेरी इंजीनियरिंग डिग्री सिर्फ नेम से है, मुझे नहीं आता कुछ. और मैं एटलीस्ट ऐसे 2 लोगों को जानता हूँ जिन्हें इंजीनियरिंग का ई नहीं आता है, बट मुझे फिजिक्स आती है क्योंकि मैंने पढ़ी है, मैंने उस पर काम किया. मुझे थोड़ा बहुत डिप्लोमेसी समझ में आती है क्योंकि मैंने उसमें काम किया. मुझे इंजीनियरिंग नहीं आती. तो ये इंजीनियरिंग की डिग्री, ग्रेजुएट डिग्री होना इज नॉट अ क्वालिफायर. चने मटर की तरह बिक रही है, हर गली में एक नई यूनिवर्सिटी है, हर घर में कॉलेज है. तो उसमें हमने मालूम है क्या किया? What we've done is कि we have produced डिग्री वाले टेक्नीशियंस, not engineers, who can think and solve a problem. We have produced technicians, and these technicians, which includes me, by the way. I have electrical engineering bachelor's, और मैं अपने घर का एक तार ठीक नहीं कर सकता. मुझे आते नहीं, मैं क्लास ही नहीं गया, है ना. We are products of Macaulay's education, by the way. He wanted to produce clerks. We are just clerks with science degrees. You getting my point? So our education system is at fault, Baba, and it needs radical reformation. तो हमें जंतर मंतर पे धरना करना चाहिए, ये कह के कि हमें पढ़ाओ बाबा, तुम पढ़ा नहीं रहे हो हमें अच्छे से, हम पढ़ना चाहते हैं, तुम अच्छी किताबें दो, तुम खोलो लाइब्रेरीज. नेशनल डिजिटल लाइब्रेरी ऑफ इंडिया आप देखो, रोना आ जाता है मुझे कभी कभी उसको देख के. क्या क्या मतलब कर सकते हैं उसमें, क्या किया उन्होंने. बट वन गुड थिंग व्हिच इंडिया हैज डन, एंड आई एम वेरी प्राउड ऑफ माय कंट्री when they announced it, and it fills me with pride that they are actually thinking about it, because primarily we have 2 wonderful people sitting in at the top, Astronomer Sharma of the Science Secretary of India, and Professor Vijay Raghavan, Principal Scientific Advisor. One nation, one subscription for journals. नहीं तो आप जर्नल के सब्सक्रिप्शन खरीदते रहिए, जान निकल जाएगी. पढ़ेंगे कैसे? पढ़ाई भैया बहुत महंगी है, पढ़ना है ना. तो वो एक तो ये डिग्री का हमें थोड़ा सा छोड़ना पड़ेगा. वो कुछ नहीं, हमें बेसिकली हम स्टेनोग्राफर्स हैं जिन्हें अंग्रेजी बोलनी आती है, और जिनकी परचेसिंग पावर पैरिटी थोड़ी सी बढ़ी हुई, हम जाके एलन सॉली से शर्ट खरीद सकते हैं. बस हम लोन पे कार ले सकते हैं, हमें साइकिल नहीं चलानी, और उससे ज्यादा कुछ नहीं हो सकता. तो हमें थोड़ी सी मेहनत करनी चाहिए. हम वही बात है ना, कल्चर ऑफ सेटलिंग बन गया. वो कल्चर ऑफ सेटलिंग अच्छा नहीं.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I have
Go
a
on,
question.
Please
Yeah,
go on.
Abhinav sir, please.
Abhinav, please go on.
So we have given a tag to the IT and IMs. Is that correct for this generation?
We have
So a
given.
tag of IT and IMs in our society. Sorry, sir.
No, go on, Abhinav. I'm not.
So a tag in an IT and an IM tag. Sir, an IT and an IM tag gives you a badge of winner over all the other people, especially in India. Sir, you talk about anything, be it a job, be it a marriage, be it anything, your tag shows a lot about you. Is that how we should judge the students of India? Because there are a lot of good people. We should actually not, because sir, they are, if you see the results, which people are applying for other, apart from this ITIMs. So the same company offers a good package there in ITIM, and the same company comes into our college. I mean, our college, by I mean that the tier 2 colleges or tier 3 colleges, and paying a very big amount. What is that reason, sir?
देखो, एक तो हम आईटी आईएम वाले टैग की बात करते हैं उस बारे में, पर हमें ये देखना चाहिए ना कि इंडियन सिस्टम बहुत वियर्ड है, और वो इंडियन सिस्टम इसलिए भी वियर्ड है क्योंकि इट रूट्स फ्रॉम दिस वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग पेट्रियार्कल कल्चर ऑफ आवर ओन कंट्री। तुम लड़के पैदा हुए, तुम चीते, ठीक, तुमने साइंस पढ़ ली, तुम और बड़ा चीता, फिर तुम इंजीनियरिंग कर रहे हो तो तुम चीते हो गए। तो वो तुम्हें विनर बता रहे हैं, तुम हो नहीं, ठीक है। फिर तुमने क्या बोलते हैं, नौकरी मिल गई तो तुम और बड़े चीते बन गए। फिर तुमने घर लोन पे खरीद लिया, गाड़ी खरीद ली लोन पे, तो तुम चीते बनते ही जा रहे हो, तुम रुक नहीं पा रहे हो। तो तुम्हारा एक सूडो कल्चर ऑफ विनिंग बन रहा है जिसमें तुम सोच रहे हो कि तुम विनर हो और तुम हो नहीं। अब जब तुम दुनिया में आते हो ये सब खुद को चीता समझने के बाद, तो तुम ये देखते हो कि दुनिया तो है बहुत बड़ी, इसमें किया जा सकता है बहुत कुछ, तुम्हें आता तो है नहीं कुछ। फिर तुम क्या करते हो? फिर तुम यही चीता नेशन को फ्यूल करते हो कि तुम लड़के पैदा हुए, तुम चीते, तुमने साइंस ली तो तुम और बड़े चीते। तो वो जो दिस इज अ परसिस्टेंट हॉरिबल फेलियर कल्चर। You put yourself through failures, and I've seen people enjoy it. Now you take this. Now why are you buying to the tag of IITs, IIMs and whatever and whatnot? Because तुम्हें चीता बनना है यार, तुम्हें बनना है चीता, तुम्हें बड़ा चीता बनना है। तुम वैगनार से जैगवार के चीते बनना चाह रहे हो बेसिकली। आता तुम्हें उतना ही है, तुम्हें सब्जेक्ट मैटर एक्सपर्टीज तुम्हारी बदल सकती है इतनी उतनी, बट बुद्धि कितनी खुलेगी ये किसी को नहीं पता। तुम बैठ के अमर्त्य सेन से डिबेट करने लायक तो हो जाओगे, बट क्या तुम उस डिबेट को समझ पाओगे, ये अलग बात है। तुम वो सब कर लोगे, तुम घर में अगर आओगे और तुम अपनी बीवी से बदतमीजी से बात करोगे तो तुम्हारा चीता होना सब धरा कर रह जाएगा, तो वो भी अलग बात है। तो ये बहुत सारी चीजें। अच्छा, एक एक ये इंडियन, मैंने बहुत वियर्ड मेंटालिटी देखी है, और ये ना ये कॉलोनियल हैंगओवर की बात है। हमें एक ना हीरो वर्शिप करने की आदत हो गई। जैसे नेहरू को हमने बहुत बड़ा कैरिज्मेटिक लीडर बनाया, और नेहरू के बाद साइंस के अंदर बहुत ज्यादा काम हुआ है, इंदिरा गांधी ने सबसे ज्यादा काम किया। मगर जब हम साइंस की बात करते हैं तो हम सिर्फ नेहरू की बात करते हैं, क्योंकि नेहरू का करिश्मा इतना बड़ा है, हम पूजा कर रहे हैं उसकी। तो हमने इंस्टीट्यूशन तो बनाए ग्रेट, फिर हमने उस पर लाल कपड़ा लगा दिया और उसको टीका लगाना शुरू कर दिया। वो प्रॉब्लम है, हम ना चैलेंज नहीं करना चाहते। अब यही वो लोग हैं, यही वो लोग हैं जो कंपनी के एचआर में बैठते हैं, और यही वो लोग हैं जो कहते हैं कि नहीं यार, ये जो आईएम से आ रहा है ये बंदे को आता हो। तुमने अज्यूम किया है, कुछ जरूरी नहीं है भाई। you come from, you guys are from one of those top B schools in this country. I am an Agra University graduate. मैं तुम्हें साइंस डिप्लोमेसी पढ़ा रहा हूं क्योंकि मुझे आती है, मेरे पास कोई ठप्पा नहीं है। तो आपका अगर सब्जेक्ट मैटर एक्सपर्टीज ठीक है, अगर आपको आता है तो उस ठप्पे की जरूरत नहीं है। पर हाँ, ये एक ये हिंदुस्तानियत की बात है कि हमें ना वो एक तमगे पहनने के शौक होते हैं कि हम हैं तो मारवाड़ के राजा, मगर हमें जो ना विक्टोरिया क्रॉस चाहिए जरा, तो उससे कोई खास फर्क पड़ नहीं रहा। वो बेसिकली हमारी इनकॉम्पिटेंस पे एक बहुत सुनहरी पाजेब पहनाने की जैसी बात है, और कुछ नहीं। अमन,
Thank you, sir.
चलो, are we finishing the talk or do we have more
Yeah.
questions?
Yes, sir. This has truly been an inspiring session. I believe
Give me a
that our
second.
audience.
I would like to finish this by saying
Yes.
that I'm very happy that I was invited, and I'm extremely grateful that I was invited. And I would like to particularly thank my friend Bani for this entire talk through, and she's been very instrumental in pulling things out that I should talk about this and I should not talk about that, and all that was going on for the past 2 days, because I get really worked up when I'm talking. But this was really fun, and I would like to congratulate Club Prayaas at the IBS, and I'm going to wish you all the best for the Prakaran Pecunia and the Skilling India presents C-Suite 4.0, which is you're doing as part of your Corporate Month 2020. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your wishes, sir. This is there. Sorry, this has truly been an inspiring session. I believe that our audience today have not just enjoyed this session, but also taking knowledge which shall be useful for them in long run. From talking about new age intellectuals to romancing the Indian space program, Mr. Pranav Sharma has had a momentous journey. Today was nothing less as he leave behind an amazed audience. And we this time today. I would also like to thank our promotional partner IBS Messenger and our coverage partner Newswire. Last but not the least, our amazing audience of the day. On behalf of Club Prayaas, I thank all of you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for a lovely audience.
I would like to especially mention Vishwaprotim Bhattacharya, who was kind enough to extend a warm invitation to me. And he's been a dear friend always, and he's seen me through in all the phases that I've been here and there in all layers of my life. And I am really thankful to him that he put forth this talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for this amazing event. You have been a lovely audience.